Alright, so I want to quickly give an update on where we are in terms of development and find out from the rest of the team. And also, I want to continue conversation about the parameters list that we started last week. So I have the task list here. A lot of work this week or last week went into the sample provisioner. Sajan has worked on implementing bucket delete and bucket access delete. So revoke credentials and delete the bucket. Sajan, do you want to quickly give us an update on that? I know you've made the PRs.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I made the PR for bucket delete and bucket access delete, and they are in master. So yeah, that's an update.
Okay. And they currently revoke credentials only of one type, right? Which is the tokens, which is access key and secret key, not service account.
Yeah, yeah. No, currently, we don't have service account, but I can add that as well.
And do they also delete the role that we create associated with this user?
Yeah,
So they delete both the role and the, okay, good. Okay.
role is like common, right? We don't have to delete roles. We can delete the user itself.
So one access credential would be for one specific user, correct?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay. And the role that is the where we say that user gets access to S3 buckets, that's a separate object, correct?
yeah. Policy, right?
Policy, yeah.
So
And
we will have a common policy for a particular type of user, and
yeah,
another policy for a different type of user, right?
right. That is correct. So each bucket access is its own user, correct?
Yeah.
So when we delete the bucket access, we need to remove both the policy and the user.
Why we will delete the policy? Because it policy will be common among multiple users, right?
Think of it, policy will not be common among multiple users. Um, policy is for, how do I put this? So a policy is for a particular user for a particular bucket. So if you create a policy, it's specific to a bucket, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, so when you delete the credentials of that user for the bucket, actually policy is for a bucket and a bucket class. Sorry, bucket access class. So when a user specifies a policy, they do it through the bucket access class. And so you can have multiple users for the same bucket with different policies.
Okay.
So it might be better if we delete the, actually the right thing to do here would be to delete or create a policy, a separate policy for each bucket access that we create. So each time grant access comes in, I think it's best to create a new user and then create a new policy. And when we do revoke, we remove both.
Okay.
Yeah,
I can
that
do that.
makes very good.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah. That'll be the correct way to do it.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. So moving on. Hey, Krish. I know you've been out last week, so I wanted to catch up on where we are in the development of the node adapter.
Yeah, so I'm a little out of the loop on what happened over the last week, so I'll have to review the meeting minutes and notes, and also the Slack just to get caught up. But if I remember correctly, or I guess 2 weeks ago, there was some discussion about like topology and different ways of providing like credential authorization, like for alternative forms of authentication. I'm not sure what the like end result of that discussion was, or if it's still ongoing. Do you have any updates on that?
Yeah. So I think you're talking about how the credentials would be put into the container, correct? Like the location and
Yeah, that was one part of it.
Okay. Okay, so what we've decided is for each bucket that's getting mounted into a pod or that's being provided to a pod, we're going to put a bunch of files pertinent to that bucket into its own directory in the pod. So each bucket gets its own directory, and inside of it you'll have a bucket.json file which has a standard format, and the contents of that file will include things like the region, the endpoint, and other bucket related metadata. You'll have the credentials file, and then a bunch of files for the certificate authorization. So we can go more in detail maybe offline, but that was the result of the discussion. We had some discussions about how we're going to what the contents or the format of bucket.json is going to be, but yeah, we can go more in detail offline.
Okay, yeah, that sounds good. I'll ping you after this meeting.
Sounds good. Yeah, let's do that. And Rob, do you want to quickly give us an update on Sidecar?
So not too much has moved on Sidecar. We've got this KEP update that we need to finish the review on and get merged so that we can make the appropriate changes into the code repos so that we can get into the official repos. That's kind of the big issue in my plate.
Okay, so
in my opinion.
Yeah, let's quickly go over that. Shing is also here. Maybe we can just bring it up right now. This is the one, right?
Well, that's the KEP.
No, this is the.
Yep.
Yeah, so let me actually pull the diff. So we need to make this green. I think it's like grammatical checks, but we can get that done easily. Okay, so this is all, okay, this is structural. I'm not going to look at that.
Nope.
Oh yeah, so this is the proposal to add parameters into the, bucket star objects.
Well, most of them already have it. It's really basically adding parameters into protocol because Bucket already had parameters, Bucket class already had parameters.
Right. So what we're doing is we're taking out the protocol specific fields and instead putting in key value pairs or of string types. That'll be opaque set of protocol specific parameters, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're removing all the protocol specific stuff and adding just common ones that we know, and then a parameters field, right, for various parameters related to that protocol.
Yeah, that sounds good. I think we had a conversation about what do we do if, okay, so this parameter is only going to be in bucket class, right? Not in the bucket itself. Sorry, not in the bucket request.
Correct.
Yeah. Sounds
Bucket
good.
request isn't changing.
Okay. Okay, so bucket class is going to get parameters, which is a map string.
Well, it's going to get hold on, if you go up, Sid, you just go up a little more to a bucket class, right? So there's already a parameters there. It's getting a protocol parameters.
Yeah, this is the existing parameters, this is the protocol parameters, okay?
Right.
But I thought
Jeff.
I thought there was a desire to give the user some ability to influence the provisioning of a new bucket through like BR.parameters. I thought that was sort of what we were thinking a while, 2 weeks ago, say.
Yeah, I remember that too, Jeff. I think we were saying there might be a case where user would have to be able to provide some of these parameters in the bucket request.
I thought, Rob, it was a use case. I thought it came from you, Rob, actually, that it was a use case that you saw value in from your experience, OpenShift clusters.
Yeah. So we've talked about that. I wasn't implementing that in this. but we have talked about adding a parameters to BR to allow, yeah, as you say, influencing the bucket. And if there's a conflict between the BR parameters and say the BC parameters, then we just bail. We don't try to reconcile it.
Yeah, I think it adds that layer of it makes error handling harder, and I think it actually doesn't help the user experience as much as it hurts.
Well, Sid, are you saying we should not
Yeah.
consider BR dot parameters for MVP?
No, I think we should not consider it even in the future. So where I'm coming from is it is still possible. So thinking about the structure of an organization, and Rob might be able to speak more to this. I think the admin should be well equipped to create a set of access classes or bucket classes for the different combination of parameters. From at least my experience, and I work with a lot of customers, what I found is they have a limited set of types of buckets. I would say each type would correspond to one set of parameters, like region plus some bucket options. And these the types of buckets are generally pretty well contained, in the sense they don't have too many combinations of that. Because if a company has a policy to have some sort of security policy on the buckets, it's generally across the board, or most parameters will work that way. The one place where I see this model breaking down, where only the admin can set the parameters, is in the self-serve model. If we want to easily enable that self-serve use case, where an engineer, not a DevOps engineer, just like a software engineer, wants to be able to provision buckets on the fly, just as and when they please, then depending on how important that specific use case is for us, that's the one place where this model breaks down, where BR does not have parameters and BC only has parameters.
Right. There's some, when you were mentioning that, Sid, I was thinking of a use case of developers. It's a developer cluster, and the admin, delegates more responsibility to individuals.
Are the parameters you guys are talking about like driver-specific parameters, or something that every user is supposed to know about? Parameters. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
The rule with driver-specific stuff is like, end users of the API aren't supposed to know what driver is installed. They're just supposed to use the API and get something standardized. And so the moment you step into driver-specific stuff, you're acting like an administrator. And if your use case requires you to do that, then you just have to have administrative rights on the cluster where you are. But that's actually quite common for, the developer clusters you were talking about. The developer may be an admin and may be empowered to create his bucket classes because he knows what the driver is and he can get his job done. But then when you go to a more standardized, you're just a consumer of a cluster, you're not the admin, you don't know what driver is there, and you shouldn't care.
Agreed. Yeah, agreed. So that brings me back to the current implementation, or the current way we're thinking about it, is seems solid to me. Any other thoughts on this? Okay, so Rob, I think there is a script on this repository under the directory hack, which does a grammatical check, error check.
Yeah, I mean that's trivial. If that's the only concern, I can do that later.
Yeah,
I just want to get if the content correct, rather than quibble about wording or whatever it is that's unhappy about. If we're okay with the comment, I can make it green, but I don't want to spend a bunch of time on that and then have it,
Rob, I think we're there in the sense that, to me, at least, I'm not gone through it completely thoroughly, but from initial review, the overall design seems right to me. And obviously, I'd like Ben or Jing to take a look at this, and I'm going to paste a link to this on our chat. Assuming that it's correct, the smoothest way to get this through is to have that green. So whenever Jing or Ben reviews it, it's ready to go. Where's the
Okay, I guess I can spend time on that. As I said, I'd rather, I mean, as long as like Ben or Xing are okay with the basic construct of it,
right?
like the changes to it.
Yeah, I understand. You're right. Okay, so
last time in the Thursday's meeting, we still haven't drawn the conclusion on that change with regard to adding parameters under protocol, right? So I think we probably still need to bring that.
So last week, the question was around, we were talking about this in last week. We were talking about, should we have parameters in the bucket request and the bucket class, or just here? Because if we were to have parameters in both the bucket request and bucket class, we end up with a conflict issue. So this week, one thing we realized was thinking about how it's going to be used. Parameters specific to a provisioner cannot possibly go in the bucket request. This should be completely without provisioner specific fields. So it makes the design simpler. And I think we have overall consensus on how we want to move forward with this. Jing, I think you can give us a review on that, and maybe we can ping Saad or someone. Sorry, it's not this one. And have him also take a review. But I think this is ready to move forward.
But we weren't talking about the request objects. We were talking about the actual bucket objects that get created and have basically the results from the provisioning operation.
So in what sense?
So maybe I'm.
That's a response field, right? You're talking about the response field. There was something coming back on the response field, and there was also something in the request field.
The protocol parameters were the issue of discussion last week, right? And those are, unless I'm horribly mistaken, I thought those were populated by the provisioner. Like that's part of the result of a creation operation.
I think that's in the. Can you go back to the? I think it's in the request field, right? Can you go back to that cap?
Mm-hmm.
That's my understanding. Is in the request. So yeah, it's in. Where is that? This is the class.
Under protocol.
I think in the request somewhere there was some place.
In the bucket request, you mean?
I thought it's in there. Well, yes. Is this Is this
This is the bucket object.
Okay. Yeah, this is like the response thing.
Oh, you're calling this the response? Okay, so this is.
I mean, it's what gets created after you request something.
Yeah.
So what is in your? Can you go back to the request field again? I was thinking this was like I thought you were talking about the. What is in the request again then?
Nothing has been added there. It's as it was.
So it's just a class. It's a. Okay, so the request protocol is the same, and then class name.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
so
and then
the bucket class.
Okay.
So on Thursday we were talking about like the driver filling in protocol parameters, including things like potentially endpoint or region or, and that's where we got into actually here it is, the one you're showing here, but this is bucket class.
This is class. So
okay.
So the class
whole discussion was about the bucket class and putting
the parameters are in both. I think that was the
on
discussion.
The protocol. Yes.
I can't hear both of you, so just one of you, please.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Shane.
I was just Yeah, I think this is the place, right? So why we have parameters in both place now, like under protocol, and also it's like outside, it's like a direct field. Whether we should combine them or we should.
Yeah, that was a good thing.
Yeah.
I think we agreed on this also. So there are some fields. So stuff like things that are related to the protocol should go into the parameters field inside the protocol. However, there are. I'm trying to remember what those fields were. Actually, Ben gave an example of those fields. If we just look back at the recording, we'll be able to tell. But there are fields that are outside of the protocol that are specific to the bucket class that need to go in this parameters field.
So I would dispute that, I guess. So there are fields that are protocol specific, like say an S3 endpoint or an S3 region, right? Like those are only meaningful in the context of S3, potentially. I mean, other protocols may have similar notions, but their notion might, mean something different. And so like those things need to get communicated from the actual provisioner through to the pod, right? They have to make it all the way through to the pod. So when the pod opens up its bucket credentials or its bucket info, like it can see those fields, like the endpoint, the region. They have to make it all the way in.
Right.
But so I don't like the idea of including them as parameters here, because that implies that they're somehow opaque. And like we know that there are certain fields that are necessary for S3, and then there are other fields that are optional. And just having them be a random string map doesn't give us a way to do any kind of error checking or validation, or ensure that they're always present, or allow clients to rely on them, right? Because if they're just parameters, then they could all be missing. And then if you need one of them, what are you going to do?
I think it should come from the provisioner, don't you think?
Yeah, well, I mean, yes. So I like the idea of having the general parameters down at the bottom where the admin can just add extra stuff, which their particular driver's documentation says that driver understands. But like those are driver specific parameters. Like for protocol stuff, I submit that like we need to have a fixed set of parameters that are meaningful for every protocol.
Oh yeah, I think we talked about this. Yeah, I remember now. So yeah, we said a set of well-defined keys is what's needed there.
Yes.
Yeah.
As opposed to just a string map. And the counter argument was, well, what if a particular S3 provisioner has some extension that does S3 plus extra magic, and they want to communicate that extra information all the way through to the pod to say, hey, by the way, this extension is available. Then they were like, well, we'll use parameters so the driver could potentially put stuff in that would work its way back.
Sorry, what was that? I didn't follow.
So no, that didn't make any sense. I'm sorry. I'm halfway thinking out loud. That there was this idea that like the protocols can't be fixed because they might change over time, and we might have extensions, and as we add them, we don't want to have to change this API object.
Oh, the notion wasn't the API object being the not wanting to change it. The issue was like, this is what I saw with the cloud provider work I was doing too. It is when they want to add a critical field, they'll be stuck behind the Kubernetes lifecycle, development lifecycle.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, that's fundamentally what the issue is that like, if we pick a set of fields and then later we want to add one, it takes a long time to add the new field. And like I buy that argument if you can convince me that we will need to add new fields, but where I want to push back is like, I hope we can get it right such that we don't need to add new fields. I guess that's
the best case scenario. You're right. That's definitely the best case scenario when it's typed and we know what it is.
And I think we can do that with at least S3, because S3 is a relatively well understood, relatively old protocol.
That's my concern with S3 too. So there are a lot of S3 vendors coming out, and Amazon, to stay competitive and relevant, they're going to add new things. So recently, actually, Amazon added object locking, where you make some objects read only and you make others read write. And you need to pass in for when you create the object, when you create the bucket, you say this is a worm bucket or write ones, read many. You don't overwrite anything. So that's how you make that bucket a lock bucket. So stuff like that gets added.
Well, hold on. I mean, so those kinds of features that are involved at creation time are not the problem here, because those can just go through ordinary parameters. The provisioner can understand them. The provisioner can implement them.
No, but that's a protocol specific parameter. S3 added that.
But the protocol specific piece here, or at least the protocol specific piece that needs to show up in our downward API that faces the pod, all that protocol, the only information needed there is like, how do I access the bucket, right? It's like, I need to set up my S3 client to be able to log in and authenticate and read and write information. And like at that stage, like I don't need to know whether it's worm or not, because I'm just reading or I'm just writing. And like,
yeah, that's true. So what you're saying is inside of the parameters field in the protocol, we should keep that to just the things needed for the pod to access this this bucket. So
the stuff that a workload would have to receive from Kubernetes to be able to interact with the bucket, and I believe there's like 5 fields, including the access key and the secret, which might actually be communicated separately as secrets, that are part of the protocol, standard protocol. And if you just communicate those, I think you're done.
I think I like that. You're right. So if we keep that parameters field inside the protocol strictly for the fields that will go into a pod.
No. I'm saying like make those first class fields, like get rid of parameters and like enumerate the actual fields that we're going to need, like region and endpoint.
I'll tell you my only reason for being apprehensive about doing that. We're trying to abstract access models for different provisioners.
But I mean, and we should do that. So like, if there's a case where like someone is doing something weird enough that we have to adjust, like I'd like to know what those cases are. But like my understanding of the S3 protocol is it's ridiculously simple.
True, S3 is, well, it's not, yeah, it's not even well documented. But I would say that S3 is you're considering the best case scenario here.
Well, I mean, so just and I unfortunately have a hard stop at 2:30, so I'm gonna have to drop off after this. But like it's basically HTTPS put and get operations with like a special header that is used to authenticate the request, and that's it.
That's the right way to think about it. You're right.
It's literally HTTPS with a header, and then of course the way you generate that header, is a couple hundred lines of code, but it's not more than a couple hundred lines of code. It's just, you got to compute some hashes and get a bunch of values together, and then out pops a string, and then you put that in the HTTPS header, and you've implemented S3. You're done. And
yeah, for S3. Okay, that's a good way to look at it. Again, one thing I want to make sure of, I'm not against this. I just want to make sure that other providers, I don't want just S3 to be capable right at the outset. So, just I think a tiny exercise that we need to go through is make sure that it works for other protocols too.
Well, I think each protocol should have its own set of fields. Like for S3, I would propose we'd have endpoint, we'd have region, we'd have bucket name. Of course, that wouldn't be a storage class thing. That would be a downward API thing. And you might have a port number in case you're running on a non-standard HTTP port. But like between those 4 things and your secret key and your access key, like we could say that's all you're ever going to need to do access an S3 bucket. And then of course all the other stuff can be parameter specific extensions to do weird things when you like worm buckets, whatever. And then but then you come to like GCS, the Google version, you're like, okay, what are the fields for Google? And I know less about it, so I can't speak to it, but like I hope that we can figure out, these are the fields that GCS needs, and then we put those there. And then for Azure blobs, and you can go down the list, and for each protocol there is some set of fields that clients should be able to rely on always receiving.
So I get what you're saying. There are a few other things that we need to consider, Ben. Again, coming from experience, generally when someone is in a field too long, not in it too long, but they get kind of too into it, and they can't think from a larger perspective. So I'm saying that as a disclaimer when I say this, because I don't want to be holding this back. But there are things like encryption that needs to be enabled, and for that you need to talk to a key store, and this needs to be done while creating the bucket. And there are different access models. Say Amazon comes up with a new access model. It needs to fit in with this with this bucket that JSON we're trying to create.
So a new access model, yes, but like they've already done that a couple of times, right? We had S3v1, S3v2. I don't know if there was an
model across
S3v3.
AWS. So they might say it's going to be two-factor auth with your phone being the second device or whatever, right?
Right, but that would be like an S3v5, right? Like S3v4 is a specific way of computing a header that goes in an HTTP request.
Yeah, but it's a security question here. Amazon releases this feature, and Kubernetes doesn't have it for 9 more months. And even after that, it's only at the bleeding edge version of Kubernetes. OpenShift is going to take 2 years to get it, which is a problem, right?
But then that's the same thing with everything else, right? I don't think that we should.
No, that's why we did the cloud provider work.
We should adhere to the same design principles.
That's why we did the cloud provider
work. That's what I'm saying, right?
So Shing, that's why we did the cloud provider work. In the cloud provider work, we completely don't manage. Like in CSI, we try to have every field, and today we don't even use all the different providers that are there. But in the cloud provider, the main thing that I did was take out anything that is protocol specific or cloud provider specific out of Kubernetes, and that's what has made it move forward this much. We should do the same thing here, I think.
Yeah. Shing and Rob, I think
Ben,
we've agreed philosophically that we don't want object store vendors to be locked into Kubernetes release cadence. That's sort of one of the main motivations of removing all the storage plugins, right?
So for all the, for creation and deletion and all the interactions with the provisioner, I think you have a lot of flexibility to rev quickly and add new features and stuff, because that's all stuff that the provisioner is involved in. The problem is that we're trying to create a common API for the end users who are writing the workloads, and like those guys just move a lot slower, right? That's the Kubernetes API that end users see, and like once they start consuming Cozy, it's gonna be lowest common denominator type stuff that they're gonna be interested in, because that's the whole point of standardizing this stuff in the Kubernetes API is like, once this is in, like you can rely on
no. I think we're getting that wrong philosophically. I don't think Kubernetes should get involved in anything. We should not standardize the protocol, because the protocol is temporary. Kubernetes.
Why do we need a Cozy? I thought if you don't want to standardize.
No.
Yeah,
we should not standardize
Cozy is
S3,
to create the standard.
not Cozy itself. We should not standardize how S3 is accessed through Kubernetes. That is literally that I'm from experience.
But we have to.
We have to.
Yeah, like the whole point of like having a mechanism for injecting the bucket details into the pod is because we don't like the situation we're in today, where like you have to basically communicate the bucket details to the pod out of band, like in environment variables or something. We're trying to do.
We're still doing that with the opaque set of parameters. The question is, should we have opaque set of parameters or typed fields here? Again, I'm not completely opposed to having typed fields here. I'm simply just bringing up some of the challenges we might face. We can go either way, because again, it's just typed fields in the parameters.
I don't think
already parameters there. So
I don't think we can have opaque fields in an API, and I think we agreed a couple weeks ago that like that interface that we're presenting to pods is a kind of API, and this is an important, I guess, philosophical maybe departure that we have is that I think that API has to be locked down and rock solid and nothing opaque in it, and you're arguing that there are good reasons for having opaqueness there, and I guess we're not going to agree.
No, not at all. When that's not going to happen. No, I'm saying we'll definitely come to a conclusion. We'll come to an agreement. I see. The thing is, unless everyone's happy with how we move forward, we're not really moving forward. That's how I look at it. And we all should feel like we're successful here.
So I wanted to. Sorry, Sid. Can I chime in real quick?
Go ahead, Rob.
So I thought maybe I'm misunderstanding like the discussion in its entirety here, but I thought if you go up to the bucket object, Sid, in this KEP, I thought what you were talking about, Ben, is what we were trying to do. So we have in the protocol field there, we have things bucket name, endpoint, and then parameters. So the understanding that I had that we were doing with this was that we were indeed trying to pull out the common fields that you would need to access a bucket and make those first class API points. And then everything else is in the parameters field, because to if there's any specific, as you say, like extensions or anything like that, but like a bucket name and endpoint, and maybe like, as you said, credential fields or something, and that would be common for all providers. And then any other data that comes back from the driver, right, would go throw into the parameters field. And that would be something that your workload would have to know I'm running on something, or be able to parse a parameters field if you needed that information. Am I understanding the problem space correct here?
I think that is the problem, and I think my stance is just that last part should not be a thing that can happen, right? We should have all of the common things defined, and then everything else should have to go through a standards rev to get a new field in, because in order for it to be consumed by workloads, it has to be something that workloads can assume will always exist. And this whole, it's opaque, it's just something that my driver happens to know about, creates the lack of portability, right? Because now if I create a workload that depends on that field being present, and then I move to a different cloud that has a different cozy provider, the field isn't there anymore, and I break. And that's exactly what we're trying to avoid, is this, tying workloads to implementations of provisioners. We want, when I ask for an S3 bucket to Kubernetes, I should get an S3 bucket, period. And like, I should always get the same thing every time, and there shouldn't be any variability. And that's sort of how it is with PVs today and PVCs, is, you create a volume and you get a volume, and there's a certain minimum set of things that you can assume are always there, and then anything else is just sort of something that you have to learn about out of band. And I feel like what we're trying to do here is put the out of band stuff in band by creating this parameters field, and that's what I'm pushing back against. Is I think it's unnecessary. I understand the desire, but I don't agree with it.
No, that's fair. No, it's a fair point what you're saying. Yes.
I have to apologize, because I am now 10 minutes late to a meeting and people are yelling at me. So I'm going to drop, and I will be at the Thursday meeting if we want to reconvene.
We'll definitely. Ben, we won't make the decision without you, so we'll talk again on Thursday. Yeah.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
Thanks, Ben.
Thank you, Ben. So to conclude on that, I think Ben has a good point. I think Ben has a really good point, which is, as someone who's writing an application, I don't want the parameters field to change willy-nilly just because I say I upgraded the version of the provider or something.
Yeah, I think that's critical, right?
That is.
So I think there were a couple of different protocol uses here, right? So in the bucket, the bucket protocol information needs to be that top level, how do I access the bucket, right? Mm-hmm. But in the BC, the BC parameters, those things can be opaque, because that is the administrator, I would think, the administrator saying, this is the protocol parameter fields that are set up for this bucket class when it creates a bucket in the back end. So maybe the parameters field in this protocol shouldn't be here.
Maybe. I have a larger concern, Rob. For one second, I want to go off on a tangent. Maybe Shing can help answer this. So Shing, in the CSI world, where we have specific fields for different providers, a lot of times with a lot of customers that we work with, they seem to use the generic CSI specification for requesting a volume rather than specifying precisely, a provider of a particular type. So say, they don't choose something like fiber channel. Rather, even if it's fiber channel, the set of parameters are specified in the PVC for a generic CSI driver. Would you is there a reason? Okay, first of all, do you see more people going towards that model where they don't use the type
Saying why they don't use there is an existing
types? Yeah,
fiber channel driver or iSCSI driver.
yeah.
Why can they use them?
Yeah, is that no? My
I'm
question is
actually
more
not that
like,
familiar with those drivers. I think those drivers doesn't really provision. I thought it's like it's already provisioned. You actually just attach it. I could be wrong. I haven't really looked at that in detail.
no, I mean at a higher level.
But I mean every driver. So yeah, so that's parameters field, right? So if you go down, not under protocol, but we do have this parameters field. Each driver has every storage system is different. They do have something that is opaque, so that is hidden under the parameters, right? So I think so. I was thinking that this should be similar to that. We shouldn't have another parameters under protocols. That's
I see.
yeah.
So one last question about CSI, and then so the last question is, so there is a CSI driver which is just generic. That is, you can put in the name of any storage class in there, and the parameter is only opaque, correct?
The parameters are opaque. Yeah, everything else is the same. Yeah, the first class fields that you can, that should be the same. Yeah.
Yeah, and there are other type CSI drivers like like EBS CSI driver is a type, and
Well, that's the same, right? It's just they have their own parameters that are required by their driver, but everything else, the common field, the first class field should be the same, right?
So if they want to make a change to the API, like here, like say for EBS, so
no, you can't. It's actually that is true. It is difficult to make a change.
Okay.
But that is the principle, right? That's you use this common API, so you're bound by whatever that is in that API. So you can't just go. So if you want to require some change, then you have to have like a valid use case, right? Then we have to see, is that required by everybody? Can you just hide this under parameters, right? So most likely it's probably okay just to have that under parameters.
So another question I have is, like, are there any changes that were required that were absolutely needed right away? Like I can imagine, like say there's a security fix, right? For that, let's say you need to add a field. Does this, like, I feel like this might hold it back, right?
Those are the entry ones. We don't like the one that you're looking at. Those are the entry drivers. We're talking about CSI drivers. So CSI drivers are like only one. There's the CSI.
Right. So CSI driver is only one. So, and that one is completely opaque, correct?
That one you can take a look. That one does not have many things. It's just like a driver name or something.
It's just opaque.
Yeah, so there are common. Yes, you can see that there are some common.
Driver name, that makes sense. Yeah. Read only, and FS type. Yeah, we also have some common names, like the driver name would, in our case, is the protocol name. We don't have a read only option, but we do have a version, and we have attributes. We call that parameters. So this is kind of where I was going for, because like you said, the entry is completely moving away, and we're only having this. What Ben is suggesting is we should have entry for object storage, and that's what I'm concerned about. Like I think entry for object storage will lead to the same thing again, where we'll move away and we'll just do parameters like this later on. What do you think?
No, this one will be here.
So this one's going to be here, right? Yeah. This one is going to be here. But what I mean is, we stopped using, say, for instance, there's an example here. I saw like iSCSI and stuff earlier. Like, Storage OS. Storage OS is out of business right now.
Are you sure?
I mean, Storage OS is those guys. Tell me if I'm wrong, but those are the guys that came up with a machine that they give to free for others. They give it as a heater for the home, and they run blockchain mining, and they came up with some storage system for it, and they call it Storage OS. So because the machines generate so much heat, they were sold as home heaters.
Well, yeah. So if a plugin is not supported anymore, then yeah, that driver just not supported, right? Eventually marked as deprecated, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So my question here is, are people using this, or are people mostly using CSI driver?
Right now we're moving to CSI, right? So it's basically
right.
that one. Yeah. So
Right,
everything
here.
it's moving slowly, but everything will be moving out, right? So
to this.
so the empty field is this one. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm saying for bucket object storage, we do the same thing. We start with this instead of having the other one first and then moving. I'm saying we start with this. Start with this means not this specific type. We start with this model where we don't specify, we don't have any fields that are particular to a protocol like Storage OS. Instead, we have one generic struct with a map string set of volume attributes. So that's the proposal here. What we're saying is, instead of having S3, Azure, and Google Cloud here, we'll inevitably end up at that point where we'll have to move to parameters. So I would rather avoid this, because we'll then have to have a complicated.
Also, you're saying like don't specify each one, because that was what I was proposing earlier. Like
you were right that time. Yeah, absolutely.
You have to specify everything. I thought that was, but
true.
I think Saad was suggesting that he said we should have this. I forgot what was the reason, but we should check with him.
Yeah, we should check.
I thought it was for some reasoning that they want this one. I actually don't like this, because like, in CSI we don't have this. Why this one we have to?
Yeah, I think it was because
you add a product, every time you add a new whatever the provider, then you have to add a field here every time.
True. Right? Exactly. That's my concern too. Yeah. You said it right. So let's do this.
I think with what Ben was saying, we wouldn't necessarily have to do that, right? I mean,
we can with well-defined fields. So
yeah. I mean, if we have a well-defined set of fields saying you have to be able to provide this information to access the bucket, the drivers have to provide it.
Yeah.
That's all we would care about, right?
Yeah, like here we have set of well-defined fields. We have just 2 or 3 well-defined fields. Yes.
Right.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So I guess then we wouldn't have to worry about adding new providers that need new fields or whatnot, right?
True.
Yeah, I think we didn't. Yeah, I don't think I got this initially. I don't think last Thursday meeting we even talk about this. I'm not sure if everybody.
I was trying to communicate this. Maybe I didn't do a good enough job.
Yeah, because I was.
So, I think for the bucket here, I think it makes sense to remove parameters for this use case, right? Because in the bucket, right, we're saying you need to have in the protocol field of the bucket, we're saying you need these fields to access the bucket name, endpoint, whatever else.
Predefined. If they're already predefined, we don't have to pass the parameters into the pod, because we have the predefined set of fields. So parameters should still exist, being the set of fields that are not passed to the pod, but that are specific to the protocol that we're talking about.
But those would be coming out of the provider, right?
Yeah. So
I mean, actually, no. I mean, so those would be set. So I guess first off, those would be copied from the BC.protocol parameters, and then the driver would come out with its own set of parameters, which may supersede those.
Well, no, we don't want to. No, drop. We have a separate set of parameters for that here.
No, that parameters was for non-protocol specific stuff.
Yeah, so driver specific stuff. Yes.
Well, I'm saying that the driver could come out with protocol stuff like this is the region it got put into. This is what other information that may override the BC.parameters.
What do you mean defaults?
Well, whatever the protocol ends up doing.
No, we can't do that, right? Because the user will not understand the experience then, because then they might specify something in the BC, but they'll get something different. That I don't see why that use case matters.
Well, that's what we talked about doing. That's exactly what we talked about, was having BC.protocol.parameters copied here in the B. Then that gets passed to the driver, and the driver returns information which could overwrite that.
Driver returns information which could overwrite that.
We could override the protocol.parameters.
I'm confused.
That is what we talked about doing.
No,
now, if we don't want to do that, that's fine, but that's what we talked about.
Hold on. So we said that driver might return new fields that are not a part of protocol. So for instance, if you don't specify a region, the driver will choose a default region for you.
Right.
That absolutely goes back into the protocol. You're right.
Right.
However, I don't see why it should overwrite an existing field. That sounds wrong to me. So like,
it's always possible.
Overwrite, now, when you say overwrite, what it sounds like to me is you specify region as US East 1, but then the driver only provisions in US West 1, and then it provisions anyways, and then returns and says US West 1. Now, that's a terrible user experience, and it can destroy companies with the AWS bill.
I would agree, but I mean, that's for like region, right?
Yeah.
We've said like there's a lot of protocol fields, right? That we don't know that we can say that it's that clear.
Yeah, but this should so Rob, I think this should be input. I don't think there should be output as much. Anything that, again, if there are defaults, sure, there are defaults, but I don't think we should have that form of design where the driver returns something, we overwrite parameters set by the user. Like, this is the input field, and I think we should stick to that. There should be a strict input field.
Well, we still, I mean, an input field that we would update. So in other words, we wouldn't allow an overwrite.
True.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Because we would have to, as you say, if there's like a default region in that example, right, for the user account that's creating it, and that region is not passed in, then the driver would return, this is the region it was get created in. So in that case, we would allow adding to the parameters. We would not allow overwriting. Is that what we're saying we want then?
I mean, to be honest, the best case scenario is there are no defaults, and these are all required fields, and we expect the parameters to already have them. Otherwise, we error out.
But we have said that we couldn't do that, because that basically means we have to model every parameter, every protocol parameter field.
Why would we have to model it? The provider will have to model it.
So if the provider models it, right, then so we have talked about that, right, where we've said we query the provider, the provider says these are the fields that I have to have. But that doesn't include optional fields, would it?
That doesn't include optional fields. Well, regardless, for us, it's all opaque. As far as we're concerned, we're just passing along to the provider. And the provider decides if it's optional or required. Right. Why would we get in the way of deciding that? Again,
we wouldn't.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm just saying that. So I guess maybe we've lost the tangent here, but originally we're saying parameters are input, but you can update them. We're just not allowing the driver to overwrite any of the values that are already in parameters. I think that
conversation started along the lines of there are some fields that we may not know up front, but I think it's safe to say the provider is the one that gets to validate if there are fields missing or not.
Right.
If we keep it opaque, I think we create an environment for provider writers to get more consistent behavior.
So at the end of the day, are we saying that the drivers should never fill in any required fields, like zone, like region or zone?
Yeah. If it's missing, then it should throw an error.
I'm fine with that. That makes the parameters field purely read-only, and we never write into it. I'm perfectly fine with that.
Okay. Yeah. Anyone else thoughts?
Some of those fields can be optional too. So I mean, depending on what they are, I'm not sure what are required, but some can be optional.
Yeah. The provider will decide that, right?
Yeah.
That makes sense. Okay, so Shing, I think one thing we can do is, so Rob, the changes that you talked about, we don't need any change to the KEP based on this discussion about parameters, right?
Well, we might need to add some top level ones like access keys and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, that is there. Okay.
But I thought we talked about like parameters will just be outside, right? Not inside the protocol, right?
So there was one reason to keep it inside Shing. One was we want to remove this, and we need a way to specify stuff that are specific to one protocol, say S3. But there
So
are some
question,
fields.
once you move this out, does this still support multiple protocols or just one?
It'll still support multiple. Actually, that's a good question you asked. So everyone else also can pitch in on this. Given that we're going to have only a predefined set of well-defined fields here, a tiny amount of fields, do we still need a protocol parameters here?
That's what I was saying. I don't think we need that in the bucket.
Not in the bucket, inside the protocol, I mean.
Yeah, in the bucket.
Inside
So
the
in
protocol, I guess we will
bucket.protocol,
need.
yeah, bucket.protocol, I don't think we need a parameters field.
Right, we only need it at this level, right? At the bucket.spec level.
You still
don't
need one. So I think the one
Yeah.
that line 205, I think that one is fine. You don't,
Yeah.
I don't think you need both.
Yeah, you don't need both, I think. You're right. Rob, thoughts? What do you think? Does it make sense?
So from the sidecar perspective, right, the sidecar needs to be able to get the parameters somewhere. Now, so we had talked about this, right? We had said there may be, and maybe what Ben was saying is this is misunderstanding, is that there may be protocol specific parameters as well as non-protocol specific parameters, which is why we originally had a protocol.parameters and a bucket.parameters, right? And that's what we added into the bucket class. The bucket class has a protocol.parameters and a bucket class.parameters.
You're right, yeah.
So if you think in protocol, you also need the parameters, you probably should give some like concrete example why you need that. I just.
Yeah, so say we want S3 field for specifying, let's say, object locking or encryption, some new form of encryption they support, whose parameters are very new, that we've not, nobody has seen so far. So, in such a case, parameters is needed in the protocol, specific to the protocol, and it is it's an opaque field. We don't know it up front.
I think we're running out of time. We need to continue to discuss this. Yeah.
Let's do that. Yeah, is it 12? Yeah, okay. So yeah, let's continue on Thursday. I think this was a very productive discussion actually, and we'll go from there. A lot of clarity was obtained. I think we should just make a decision one way or the other on Thursday. But
I think a key point of this is that the protocol will kind of, as I see it, the protocol spec at this point is being double used, right? In the bucket, the protocol, this information, the clearly defined fields go into the bucket or into the pod, right? Is information about how to access the bucket that was created.
Mm-hmm.
But the parameters, the bucket protocol parameters are used by the sidecar to pass protocol information to the driver for creation of the bucket.
True. Rob,
I need to drop off. I have another meeting.
Yeah. I don't want to keep others for too long.
Yep.
But let's continue discussing this throughout the week, and Thursday we'll try and make a decision. Thank you, everyone. It was a good discussion. Let's continue on Thursday.